Right, we are recording. So, Sanhedrin, we are right at the bottom of page 12a. It's page 62, I believe, in the hard copy. Let me just get it up on the screen. Is it page 62?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. There it is. Right, let's just share the screen with you, and then we'll remind ourselves where we were up to. We said, Ein ma'abrin et hashana mipnei hatumah. We don't intercalate the year because of tumah, because of impurity. So what we said last week, I'm sure you can all remember. I don't know if Leon, if you had a chance to have a listen yet. So for Leon's benefit and everybody else's that's probably forgotten since last week, what we spoke about was the concept of purity and impurity, the different sort of how you get to be tameh, which largely revolves around dead bodies and creepy crawlies. And how you, and more importantly, how you become untomei, or you become tahor, pure again. And of course, that was very apt for last week because it's all to do with the para aduma, the red heifer. Poor Rav Yuval was in his drasha on Shabbat when he went into English. Philip insisted that instead of using the expression of a red cow for para aduma, he insisted that he used the expression the red heifer. When was the last time any of you used the word heifer in everyday language? I suspect not for a very long time.
No, I did when my brother was a farmer.
Yeah, was that you? They were referred to as heifers on the farm?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Well,
yes.
There you are. Another unique feature of Leon is his usage of the word heifer. Okay, so we spoke about last week about how you become pure again, involving the ashes of the red heifer being sprinkled. We spoke about the mikveh. We spoke about how today the whole concept of tumah and tahara is really only sort of durabanan, because none of us are pure. We're all tameh effectively, and we spoke about that, and that was the background to this statement that you do not intercalate the year because of tumah. And we asked the question, why would you think that you should intercalate the year for people being tameh? And we went and we spoke in detail about Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach, which takes place on the afternoon of the 14th of Iyar, a month later after Pesach. Those who were, and the Torah tells us, those who were tameh got a second chance to do the Korban Pesach and to eat the Korban Pesach with their matzah and their maror on the second Seder night, not the second Seder night as we chutzniks understand that to be, but the second Seder night a month later in Iyar, Pesach Sheni. So if you have a situation where a person cannot fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach because he is tameh, then he, as an individual, gets the opportunity a month later, second chance. You know, it's like the resits in your exams. You know, if you failed it in the summer, you've got a chance to resit it in the autumn before you start the next year. And if you passed it, well, okay, they'll let you in again. So it's a sort of a second chance for the Korban Pesach. So that's one thing. But what happens? What happens? And this is the nub of what we're talking about. If everybody is tameh, everybody, or the vast majority of the people are tameh, are impure at the time of Pesach. So what are you going to do? You've got two choices. You either say, well, you'll all have to go and do Pesach Sheni in Iyar, and we'll just have to go through Pesach in Nisan without a Korban Pesach, and we'll all do everything else that we're meant to do on Pesach, which is to eat your matzah, eat your maror, get rid of your chametz and all that stuff, all the things you have to do on Pesach, like eat eingemachs and stuff like that. So you do all of those things. Only the Korban Pesach, you can't do it because you're Tameh. And well, all of us will have to come back a month later and do it on Pesach Sheni. Or you could use that opportunity of your ability to intercalate. And then you see, let's say, a situation where you foresee a scenario where people are all going to be Tameh. And you say, okay, I can see this is going to be a problem when it comes to Nisan. We will intercalate the year and we will push Nisan off. So it won't be Pesach Sheni. We'll be doing it on the same day, effectively. That's the fascinating thing. The two different solutions to the problem of everybody being Tameh at the time of Pesach end up with Bnei Yisrael, Am Yisrael, doing the Korban Pesach on a month later. Now, if you intercalate a year, that month later is called Nisan, because you stuck in an Adar Bet, right? If you don't intercalate the year, the day that you do your Korban Pesach will be Iyar, the 14th, because it'll be Pesach Sheni. So it's quite fascinating, really. Before, in actual fact, whether you intercalate the year or not makes no difference as to which day you do the Korban Pesach. It does make a difference as to which day you do the rest of Pesach. Because if you intercalate a year, you then do the whole of Pesach a month later. And it's not Iyar, it's Nisan. And then there would be, as it were, a third chance, because you'd have Pesach Sheni a month later in the Iyar. Okay, everybody with me that so far? Yeah, okay. So that's the question. That's the question. Now, how could it be that everybody would be Tameh? Well, there are two possibilities, aren't there? I showed you a picture last week of...
Oh, it's gone again.
No, we can hear you, Leon. Okay, now we can't. So I showed you a picture last week of the funeral of Rav Kanievsky, and you can see how it could be possible for hundreds of thousands of people to be Tameh all at once because they went to that kind of funeral. And in fact, what the Mefarshim actually bring exactly that scenario, that if the Nasi, if the prince, the president of the sanhedrin, the number one top guy in the country, is seriously ill and looks like he might pass away in the very near future, and it comes towards the middle of Adar, just before Purim, or even after Purim, as we've said, and it's looking a bit dodgy that he might not survive until Pesach, then you can foresee a scenario that he's going to die within a week of Pesach, and then everybody's going to be Tameh, and they're not going to have time, because it takes a week, the purification process that we went through last week, with the ashes, the sprinkling on the 3rd and the 7th day, and the Tevilah and all that stuff, takes a week. So if the funeral of this gravely ill Nasi would take place within a week before Pesach, there's no time for the people to get pure again. And so you can foresee a scenario where everybody would be Tameh. So what you would then do is you may say, well, okay, we can foresee this is going to be a problem. We're going to intercalate a month. That's the possibility. The other possibility that everybody's going to be Tameh is that for a long time, for a long period of time, They've run out
Oh.
of Aduma ashes. So anybody who becomes Tameh, let's say they run out in at Shavuos time, right? In Sivan. Last bit of Para Aduma ash is used up. And we haven't got another Para Aduma. So what happens when all the people get Tameh between Shavuot and Pesach? They haven't got an opportunity to become Tahor again. So that everybody who becomes Tameh, and it must be a very common thing. I mean, it's very easy to come into contact with a dead body or somebody else who's come into contact with a dead body or a sheretz or all those things. How are you going to get pure again if you've got no ashes? So you have a situation whereby everybody is impure, and it could be that you've got an opportunity to do a new Para Aduma, but you can't get it done before Pesach. You can get it done just after Pesach, and therefore you might think it would be a reasonable excuse to say, you know what, let's intercalate a month, gives me another month to get the ashes ready, yeah, and then I've just thought of it, that's another expression, how to regain the ashes. You've got another month to regain the ashes and do your purification process. But the Chachamim tell us in our Gemarah, no, you can't do that. That is not a reasonable reason. Now, does anybody know why, as a background, that would not be the case? It sounds very logical to me. You need people to be pure to do this offering. Why not intercalate the year? It sounds like a good enough reason to me. Why not?
Two reasons. One, Pesach might fall into the summer, and secondly, you've got the barley offering would be far too late and people would starve. Okay.
So all the reasons that we've said before, including those ones you've just pointed out, may be true, and they would trump our reason. Let's say, though, it wouldn't push it off into the summer. Let's say this time of year it could be a leap year or it could not. In other words, it's not that we've just had a leap year and this is going to push it way into the summer. We're almost due one. Maybe it'll be this year, maybe it'll be next year. We're almost due one. And so it could be one. So you're right. Those reasons would trump it. But there's another reason, nothing to do with the spring or any of those things, why the Chachamim wouldn't allow you to intercalate a year because of Tumah. There is a
precedent.
I guess that you set a precedent, then it's a reasonable precedent. And you'd say you'd have to be clear as to how many of the people would have to be tamei to set your precedent. But I don't think that would be an issue. David, do you want to talk about Tuma Hutra B'tzibur? Tuma Tchuya B'tzibur? No, okay, well, I'll do it then. Okay, there is a concept, okay, that, and this is I don't know, I always found this, I liked this idea. The rabbis made a rule. The Torah made a rule that you can't bring these korbanot if you're tamei. The rabbis saw fit to overrule the Torah. And they made a rule that said, if the majority of the people are tamei, then you're allowed to bring those offerings in a state of tumah, in a state of impurity. Torah says you can't, we say you can. In other words, it's a sort of emergency martial law kind of idea. We're in an emergency situation, a bit like, if you like, the Hetzer Mechira of Shemitah, where they made a rule which seemingly overrules a law of the Torah. I'll come to you in a sec, Leon. I'll just finish speaking about this concept. So they said they made a rule that if the majority of the people are tamei for whatever reason, then the rule that you can't bring the Korban Pesach, or if the majority of Kohanim in the Bet HaMikdash are all tamei for whatever reason, normally a tamei Kohen cannot shech the Korban. They changed the rules and said if the majority are, we allow it. We allow these things to be done in a state of tumah when the majority of people are tamei. It almost sounds like sort of emergency law, like, you know, COVID law kind of thing, you know, or emergency measures are brought into effect. And so, because there is that option, the rabbis said there's no need to intercalate a year for that reason, because we've got a different reason how to overcome our problem of tumah. And that is that we allow tamei people to bring their Korban Pesach if the majority of people are tamei. And then they go on to have a machloket as to what is the concept of that emergency law. And I'll explain that to you when I've heard Leon's question.
Yes, I lost connection. I'm sorry to interrupt. You said that there were reasons how a majority of the population could be tamei, but I lost connection, so I didn't hear. Could you briefly just tell me how could so many people be tamei?
Okay, let me show you something if I can, and you will know in one glance what I'm talking about. Hang on a second, I'll just find it. Okay, let me share the screen with Leon and then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. See that when it comes up?
Okay. Yes.
That there in that car is Rav Kanievsky's body.
Yes, yes.
And that is his funeral. 500,000 mourners, 500,000 people went to his funeral. You've got, in one fell swoop, you've got 500,000 tamei people. The Gemarah, or the Mefarshim, speak about it. If you look in your Art Scroll Gemarah, if you look in your Art Scroll Gemarah on page 12a, note number 39,
yes,
you will on the second column, the bottom of the first column, last two lines of the bottom of the first column, you'll see exactly what that is, and there on the screen is modern day words. Let me read what it says to everybody else. When a Nasi dies, the entire nation is required to participate in the funeral and thus become tamei. If he were to die within a week of Pesach, then everyone would still be tamei when Pesach arrived. So there's one example. And another example is at the beginning of the next column, Leon, is the supply of ashes from a red heifer was exhausted.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
I have it. Thank you very much.
So that's the scenario. So we have this concept of tumah, impurity, being put aside or ignored if the majority of the people are tamei. And as I just said before, we explained that to Leon, there is a machloket as to what is the underlying concept of this emergency law. Now, if you think about it, there are two ways of looking at it. You can either say that the impurity, the tumah, is pushed aside. It's still there, but we sort of, b'di avad. After the event, with no choice, we push it aside. So it's a sort of second best. Or you can say no. Once the rabbis have made that decision that a situation where you have all the people who are tameh all at once allows you to do the offering in a state of tumah, that is it. It's as if there's no tumah at all. It's not just it's a bit of a dray. We'll just allow it because we've no choice. No, we put the tumah. It's altogether gone. It's as if the tumah is gone. So there's two different approaches there. One, the Hebrew is tumah hutra b'tzibur, which from the word heter, which means permission. In other words, that's the second one I said. Tumah hutra b'tzibur means that the tumah is permitted. It's as if there's no tumah there at all. It's gone. Or is the concept tumah dechuya b'tzibura, meaning it's pushed aside. Lidchot is to push aside. So you will have heard the expression nidche. Nidche. Where have you heard that expression? You've heard that expression on Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av that falls on a Shabbat. We don't keep Tisha B'Av on a Shabbat, do we? We keep it on the following day, on the Sunday. And that is called nidche, because it's pushed aside. Okay? And we say, don't we? Pikuach nefesh doche et hashabbat. Saving a life, doche, pushes aside Shabbat. And that doesn't mean that, as far as you're concerned, Shabbat is not Shabbat. It's pushed aside by the pikuach nefesh, from the saving a life. So the rabbis that hold that the tumah is just pushed aside, it's still there, but it's just pushed aside for the time being because we've got no choice. We've got our backs against the wall. We need to do this korban, Pesach, and so we're going to allow it in a state of tumah because everybody's tameh, otherwise we wouldn't have a korban Pesach. But really the tumah is still there. That's called tumah dechuya ditzibura. It's only pushed aside. And it's a machloket between the rabbis, whether this concept of allowing korbanot, which are not normally allowed in a state of tumah, to be brought in a state of tumah, whether that is hutra, permitted altogether, or dechuya, it's just pushed aside and it's, it's a second best situation. So that's the concept that we just need to have in mind. So let's go back into the Gemarah now. And we'll just get that back on the screen as well.
No.
Okay. So are we back with the Gemarah? Let me know when you're back with the Gemarah. Yeah. Okay. So we said, we don't intercalate the year in brackets because we don't need to, because we have this concept of tumah, either hutra ditzibura or dechuya ditzibura. Either way, we can do this korban Pesach in a state of impurity without having to intercalate a year. Intercalation of the year is only done for certain reasons, like we've been speaking about for the last few months. Main one being making Pesach come in the spring. The barley's got to be right. All the things that you're all very familiar with now. Tumah is not one of them. That's the Gemarah. That's basically what we've learned. We had to spend an hour and a half or 2 hours getting the background to understand this concept. But now Rabbi Yehuda is going to challenge that. Rabbi Yehuda is going to say, hey, hang on a minute. Are you sure that we don't intercalate a year because of a tumah? I'm going to bring you an example where we did. And so therefore I'm challenging that position. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'abrin, Oh, yes, we do. No, we don't. Oh, yes, we do. Yes, we do intercalate a year in that situation. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is going to explain. Maaseh, there was a story. Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda. Chizkiyahu, otherwise known as Chizkiyahu, in English, Hezekiah. He was the king of Yehuda. Now, before we go and see what the story was, we need to know who he was. Very important that we know who he was, when he lived, and why he's getting involved in all these things. Chizkiyahu HaMelech. You'll all have heard of the name, I'm sure. I'm sure that some of you have been somewhere that he was involved in. Anyone able to read my mind, what I'm talking about? Yes, David?
The tunnel in Yerushalayim.
Yes, the tunnels in
tunnel.
Yerushalayim. Chizkiyahu's tunnels. Those of you who've been on the Tiolim with us, we went on it once, if you remember. We needed to have our little waterproof shoes. We trudged through the tunnels. Some of you may have done the tour on your own or with your families. Chizkiyahu's tunnels. Chizkiyahu's tunnels. Now, we need to understand about Chizkiyahu's tunnels because it's relevant to our Gemarah a little bit. Chizkiyahu HaMelech lived at a time when the Assyrian Empire was in ascendancy. He was born in the 8th century BCE, and he was the 13th king of Yehuda. And he was the son of, anybody know whose father was?
Achaz.
Achaz. Achaz was his father, and who was his son?
Manasseh, wasn't it?
Yes, correct. Well done, David. Achaz and Manasseh. Chizkiyahu was a sandwich between Achaz, his father, and Manasseh, who was his son. Why do I say he was a sandwich between those two, David?
Because his father and his son were the two most evil kings in the southern kingdom.
Correct. Achaz and Manasseh. Chizkiyahu's father and Chizkiyahu's son were rotters. They were bad people. They were idol worshippers, murderers, not nice. Chizkiyahu, on the other hand, is recognized to be one of the most righteous kings of Yehuda, probably the most righteous king of the southern kingdom after the split. The split, of course, occurred immediately after the reign of Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. After that, we had a split kingdom, northern kingdom of Israel, southern kingdom of Yehuda. And it's a sorry tale. We'll get to learn it when we do Malachim Bet. We'll learn it in some detail. That will probably be in about a year or so, I would imagine, before the time we get through, no, probably a couple of years by the time we get through the rest of Shmuel, Aleph, Bet, Malachim. David thinks it's going to take longer. I'm going to speed up a bit, maybe, who knows. Anyway, Malachim Bet tells the sorry tale of the kingdom of Yehuda, which did not cover itself in glory most of the time. However, Chizkiyahu was the one standout king in the kingdom of Judah. He was the first Baal Teshuvah movement. He was the leader of the first Baal Teshuvah movement. And he was somebody who got rid of all his father's idols. His father, Achaz, had put idols in the temple, had put idols all over the place. Avodah Zarah, idol worship, was the order of the day under the reign of Achaz. When Chizkiyahu came to power, he got rid of all of that, and he made sweeping Baal Teshuvah reforms, including a law that said it was forbidden to worship anybody else other than a Kodesh Baruch Hu. But the problem was, of course, that, and I'm telling you all this for a reason, not just because we mentioned Chizkiyahu. When Chizkiyahu first did this Baal Tshuva bit, imagine there's been idols all over the place. One of the things that give you tumah are idols. So the whole country was tameh. Everybody was tameh because they'd all been involved in idol worship. He'd gone around and he'd got rid of them all and was starting all over again, reboot the whole thing. And we're going to start serving Hashem as we should do, which also involves purification of the temple and purification of the people in order that they can bring the Korban Pesach. So he's got a problem, hasn't he? He's got a problem that everybody is tameh. Now, this was before the concept of Tuma Hutra B'Tzibura, that Tuma was allowed in public situations, was either wasn't known or it wasn't well known. Either way, what did he do? Let's have a look. Let's go back to the Gemarah and see our story. Maaseh. We said Maaseh. I was going to show you the tunnels. That's what I was going to do. I was going to show you the tunnels. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Chizkiyahu's tunnels. Yeah. Oh, I know why I said that. It was relevant. Why did I mention the tunnels? Because he lived. I was putting it in its historical context. He lived in the 8th century BCE when the Assyrians were in ascendancy, and he witnessed the destruction and exile of the northern kingdom. The Assyrians came from the north, and they came into the northern kingdom of Israel, and they exiled the 10 tribes, who became known thereafter as the 10 lost tribes. Imagine you are Chizkiyahu, king of Judah, and you see this army coming down through your neighbor's country, which used to be your brother. You've split from him, but he's still your brother. 10 of your tribes have been exiled. You know what's coming next, don't you? They're coming for you. They were coming for Judah. They were coming for Jerusalem. They were coming for Chizkiyahu and his people. So what did he do? He prepared for a siege, because that's what they used to do in those days. We know that, don't we, from the Romans? We know that from Asara B'Tevet, when they started the siege of Jerusalem. We know from Shiva Asa B'Tammuz, where they broke through the wall of Jerusalem after the siege, etc. That was how warfare was. It's still happening today. I read somewhere recently that the Russians decided that they weren't going to bomb Kyiv out of existence, but they were going to put a siege around it and starve it out of existence. Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. So Chizkiyahu knew there was a siege coming. So what did he do? He prepared for that siege, and he manufactured the tunnels that were going to bring water from outside the city walls into the city of Jerusalem. And those were the tunnels, Chizkiyahu's tunnels, the tunnels of Chizkiyahu, which you and I have all been to. It's not 100% agreed amongst historians that those tunnels were actually the ones that he made, but we think they are. And many archaeologists think they are as well. And just to give you a little bit of Tanachic support for the fact that he did this, I'm going to take you over to Malachim Bet. I don't know what you've got on the screen at the moment. Have you got anything on the screen? What have you got on the screen? You got Malachim Bet?
No. We've got the Noah edition, the Koran.
Okay. Let me go to, well, let's go to Malachim Bet, chapter 20, I think it is. Yes, chapter 20, and there it is, chapter 20, verse 20. And the rest of the events of Chizkiyahu and all his mighty deeds, and how he made the conduit, Hate'elah, that's the tunnels, the conduit, et a brecha, the pool, a brecha. You know what a brecha is? A swimming pool, but it's not just a swimming pool, Stephen. It's any kind of pool. A swimming pool actually is a brechat sicha. A brecha is a pool, and sicha is swimming. So if you say brecha, usually you mean a swimming pool, but here it means a pool. So these were the Siloam pools and the Te'alah, Chizkiyahu's tunnels. There it is mentioned in Malachim Bet, and it tells us in Malachim Bet, if you want to know a bit more about it, go and have a look in the book of Chronicles. Halohen Ktuvim, they are written, Al Sefer Divrei Hayamim, they're written in the book of Chronicles, the Malchei Yehuda. So let's do that. Let's go and have a look in the book of Chronicles, which I just happen to have here for you. The book of Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim 2, Divrei Hayamim 2, Chronicles 2, chapter 32, verse 30. I don't know if you're with us, Leon. Are you with us to read?
I am now, yes. Chapter 32 I have.
Okay, let's go to chapter 32 at first. Let's go to verses 1, 2, and 3, please.
After these events and show of faith, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came. He arrived in Judah and encamped against all fortified cities of Judah, intending to breach them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had headed for battle, he conferred with his leaders and warriors and decided to stop up the waters of the springs that were outside the city, and they helped him.
Okay, let's skip over to...
A great crowd assembled.
Hang on, let's stop there, Leon. Leon, stop there and jump to verse 30 now.
He, Hezekiah, stopped up the upper source of the waters of Gihon, diverting them underground westward to the city of David. Hezekiah was successful in all his endeavors.
There you are. That is the description in Tanach, in the holy scriptures of ours. Not many people learn Divrei Hayamim. If we carry on learning Tanach, I reckon sometime in the 24th century, we will reach Divrei Hayamim, which is the last of the books of the Tanach. And we will be able to learn this in detail like we're learning Shmuel Aleph at the moment. But there we go. Our holy books describe very clearly the historical event that you and I have all witnessed with our own eyes and got our own feet wet in, Chizkiyahu's tunnels. And if that doesn't make you amazed, then you have got a soul of stone, I'm afraid. The fact that we can read in our Tanakh, in our holy scriptures, something, and then actually go there and see it and do it and be part of it 3,500 years later is, I don't know, it's, well, 3,000 years later, isn't it? Just under. I think that is just remarkable. So I wanted to show you the Tanakh, just to give me an opportunity to be once again amazed at the fact that we are living here in this wonderful country and reclaiming our history once again. So that is what Chizkiyahu was about. Chizkiyahu, that's why I wanted to show you the Tanakh, Malachim Bet and Divrei Hayamim. Let's go back to the story. I think we're going to need to go to Malachim Bet. So I'll keep Malachim Bet there, but let's just go back to the Gemarah for the time being, and let's see what the Gemarah says of our story. So you should have the Gemarah up in a second. Yep, there you go. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Maaseh b'Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda. There was a story with Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah. She'iber et hashana mipnei hatuma. He intercalated a year because everybody was tamei. Now, Steinsaltz has put a comma in there. I'm going to, for the time being, remove that comma and put a full stop. Because at this point, what are you going to say to me? You're going to say to me, well, that's a good proof that the Gemarah is wrong. Gemarah just said, we don't. Well, Rabbi Yehuda has just said, oh, yes, we do. Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Can't argue with him. He was a great guy. He was king of Judah. Not only was he
wasn't the Nasi.
Sorry?
He wasn't the Nasi.
He wasn't the Nasi, but he was the king. That's better than the Nasi. Then remember, the Nasi of the Sanhedrin was at a time where there was no king. We're finished with kings. You know, kings were done after we got exiled from Judah the first time after the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians, by Nebuchadnezzar, who was the successor to the Assyrian Empire. Once that happened, there weren't any kings anymore. The Nasi was in effect the replacement of the king. He was in effect the leader of the people. The leader of the people at this time was the king. So if there was any ibering to do, it's him to do it, and he did it. It's a fair question, but I think the answer is that he was not so much that he was in place of the Nasi, but the Nasi was in place of him, if you're with me. So he did it. So what's going on? Gemarah says you can't. Rabbi Yehuda says, I'll prove to you from Chizkiyahu that you can. Now let's replace my full stop and put the comma back and carry on. So he did that. He intercalated the year because of Tumah. And then what did he do? Ubikesh rachamim al atzmo. And he requested from Bakasha, the Bakasha, please. He requested rachamim. He requested mercy from who? From Hashem. Who for? Al atzmo. Why would he request mercy for himself? Because he realizes he's done something wrong. So the second part of this story actually is a support for the statement that we do not intercalate a year because of Tumah. Because when he did it, he then saw fit to apologize for it and to seek mercy for having done it. And it takes us off to the this pasuk here. Ki marbit ha'am rabat me'Ephraim u'Menashe Yisachar Zvulun lo hiteharu. This is let's get you that pasuk up again. 1 second. Where is it now? Can't find it now. Anyway, it's there in the Gemarah, so I'll put the Gemarah back. He says there in the Gemarah that he quotes this pasuk here, saying that a multitude of people, even many of Ephraim and Manasseh, Yisachar and Zvulun, had not cleansed themselves. So that means they were all tamei. So he intercalated the year, and then he says he has to seek mercy upon himself because he proclaimed a leap year because of this Tumah. And he shouldn't have done so. He shouldn't have done so because there it is. It's Divrei Hayomim 30. I knew I had it ready. Let me find it again. Divrei Hayomim 30. There it is. Got it all ready for you. Divrei Hayamim 30, verse 18. There we go, verse 18. Now let's go from Leon. Let's go from verse 17.
For there were many in the congregation.
I beg your pardon. Let's go from verse 15, please.
15. They slaughtered the Pesach offering on the 14th of the second month, and the Kohanim and Levites felt humiliated and sanctified themselves and brought burnt offerings to the temple of Hashem. They stood at their ordained positions in accordance with the Torah of Moses, the man of God. The Kohanim threw the blood on the altar, taking it from the hands of the Levites. For there were many of the congregation who had not sanctified themselves, and the Levites took charge of slaughtering the Pesach offering for anyone who was not pure, to sanctify it to Hashem. For many of the people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, had not purified themselves, and they ate the Pesach offering in accordance with that which is written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, may the benevolent Hashem grant atonement for whoever sets his heart to seek out God, Hashem, the God of his forefathers, though without the purity required for the sacred. Hashem listened to Hezekiah and absolved the people.
Okay, there we are. So there's a very clear statement within the Tanach that says that he prayed for them. Why did he pray for them? Because they were unclean, and they made the offering in a unclean state. And so the story in our Gemarah is that, not in the Tanach, but the story in the Gemarah is that he did, intercalate the year, and then sort of apologized for it. So let's go back to the Gemarah and see what the Gemarah is talking about now. So it seems from the first half of the pasuk that you do intercalate the year because of Tumah, and then because of the second half of this, it's clear that Chizkiyahu was not happy with what he did. He apologized, as it were. There we go. There's the end. We're on to now. Those of you that are following in a Vilna Shas, we're over the page. We've made a big progress today. We're on 12b now, and so they ate the Korban Pesach, and there it is on the screen for you. Now, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Im mipnei hatuma ibruha mu'uberet. Now, what happens in a scenario whereby the court did declare a leap year against the rules? We've said you can't do it, but they declared a leap year. Is it valid? Oh, we've got to know, don't we? We've got to know, because if it counts, then Pesach's a month later. If it doesn't count, Pesach is when it should be. Now, if we're keeping Pesach in the wrong month, then that's a big problem. It's a double problem. One, you're eating chametz when you should not be. And two, you're bringing an offering at a time when you don't need to bring an offering, when you shouldn't be bringing an offering. So knowing when Pesach is rather important. So Rabbi Shimon says you don't intercalate because of a tumah situation, but if you do, if by mistake they did, it counts. Mu'uberet, it is counted. So if that's the case, says Rabbi Shimon, Ela mipnei ma bikesh rachamim alatzmo. Why did he seek atonement for himself? Why did he apologize for doing it? If you're allowed to do it b'diavad, if it counts b'diavad, as Rabbi Shimon says, why did he apologize for doing it, Chizkiyahu? And he says, why? she'ein ma'abrim ela adar, v'hu iber Nisan ben Nisan. We already said, didn't we? We learned that the only month that you can add on is Adar. So even if you make the decision in Tishrei after Rosh Hashanah, Cheshvan, whenever it is, you make the decision, it's got to be Adar that is added in. That is the rule. And what did Chizkiyahu do? He didn't do it until the beginning of Nisan. It was already Nisan when he intercalated the year. So Rosh Chodesh Nisan had been declared. It was Nisan, and then he intercalated a month. That, says Rabbi Shimon, is why he apologized. So according to Rabbi Shimon says, you are allowed to intercalate a month, and if you do it, it counts. And don't bring me a proof from the fact that Chizkiyahu apologized for getting it wrong, because it wasn't the fact that he intercalated that he got wrong. It was a fact of when he intercalated. He intercalated in Nisan, and you're not allowed. You've got to intercalate in Adar. Let's say that again. Why did he request mercy on himself? You're only allowed to do it in Adar. He intercalated the month of Nisan during the month of Nisan itself. Okay. Now then, it gets a bit confusing now because we're going to quote somebody else.
Sorry. Johnny, where in the Tanach does it say that Chizkiyahu asked for forgiveness for himself?
It doesn't.
Exactly.
It doesn't. That's the pshat, which, and if you actually look in the art scroll says, actually points that out and says, that's exactly what it says. I'll just read you the exact words. It says, the translation follows our Gemarah's interpretation of the verse. So the Chizkiyahu was guilty of wrongfully extending the year and thus postponing Pesach. We'll learn that in a bit. Extending the year and thus postponing Pesach. According to this, Chizkiyahu asked God to forgive the sages, including himself. So when he says they should forgive, when the pasuk says, Hitpalel Chizkiyahu aleihem, on them, he's referring to this, according to the Gemarah, he's referring to the sages who did the intercalation, including himself, of which he was the leader. He says, according to this, Chizkiyahu asked God to forgive the sages, including himself, who extended the year for the wrong reason. Rabbi Shimon says that's not true. Why he went wrong was not that he intercalated it for the wrong reason, but he intercalated it at the wrong time. You're right to point that out, David. It's an interpretation of the Gemarah. The simple pshat is that he was praying for the people who were tamei themselves. And actually, if you read on, and it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu healed them, then that actually fits in with the simple pshat and doesn't fit in so well with the Gemarah's pshat. But that's the pshat of the Gemarah. The aleihem, this word here, aleihem, refers to the sages, which include Chizkiyahu himself. So we now get a bit confusing because we've just had a Rabbi Shimon statement. And now we say, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yehuda, says, and this is a different Rabbi Shimon, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, in the name of the first Rabbi Shimon. That's why it's a bit confusing. You've got Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda now saying, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, a different reason why he had to ask for forgiveness was as follows: Mipnei shehisi et Yisrael lasot Pesach Sheni. He encouraged the Jewish people to bypass standard first Pesach and instead to perform Pesach Sheni. If I take you back to the Psukim, you'll remember what Leon read out. He read out that it was on the 14th day of the second month. Let's see if I can just find that quickly again. There we go. I'll put it on the screen for you. It's Divrei Hayamim, chapter 30. Again, Leon, verse 15, please.
Sorry, I've got a bit lost here. Chapter
30, verse 15.
Of Chronicles.
Of Chronicles 2.
Right. 30:15. 30:15. They slaughtered the Pesach offering on the 14th of the second month.
Stop there. There we go. 14th day of the second month, not the first month. When is Pesach proper? First month, Nisan. When is Pesach Sheni? Second month. So you could understand this was a double whammy because they'd already postponed it to the second month and now they were still tamei. So that's why Chizkiyahu had to do what he had to do to pray for them. If you take the simple pshat of the pasuk, because they were still tamei. What you meant to do? You've already postponed it by a month. You're already in Sivan. According to our Gemarah, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, a different explanation to what we had before. We have the explanation of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, which is that the reason he had to apologize or ask for mercy, as it were, from Hashem, was because he encouraged the Jewish people to bypass the standard first Pesach and instead to perform the second Pesach, to do Pesach Sheni, which is not as good, it's second best to the Pesach Rishon. Now,
you could also interpret this, Johnny, as the same as the first explanation. And because he'd intercalated Nisan in Nisan, it turned out that they celebrate or they brought the Korban Pesach in the second month.
If it wasn't accepted, yes. If he tried, that makes sense, which comes back to what I said right at the beginning, that either way, you end up doing the Korban Pesach on the same day, just depends on which month you call it. So let's say he tried to intercalate on the 2nd of Nisan and it didn't work. It doesn't count. Rabbi Shimon says it does. So according to Rabbi Shimon, when they brought their Korban Pesach, it was Nisan. According to the opinion that says you can't do that, he did it. It didn't work. In other words, it wasn't counted. And Nisan remains Nisan. So when they did their Korban Pesach a month later, it was Pesach Sheni. So you're right, David. If you could interpret that explanation to fit in, and that's probably why Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda is saying it instead of Rabbi Shimon himself, because Rabbi Shimon has said one thing. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda is quoting Rabbi Shimon as saying something different. So that's, and I think we should stop there because we're gonna do next time this concept that I spoke to you about right at the beginning. I'll just read to you the next couple of lines of Gemarah, but we won't go into it. Amar, somebody said a master. Mar is a master, one of the Chachamim, one of the Tanaim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda said, Ma'abrin, we do intercalate a year because of Tuma. Alma, we can see it. Leil Rabbi Yehuda Tuma dechuya he batzibur. Rabbi Yehuda holds that Tuma is pushed aside as opposed to Hutra, which is completely accepted. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail next time. I thought we might have got to that, which is why I gave you the first introduction at the beginning, but I'll do that introduction again next time because we'll have all forgotten it by then. So what have we learned today? We have learned today that Chizkiyahu lived in the 8th century and that he was worried about the time of siege of Sanhedrin, and he brought this water from outside through the tunnels that we've all been to. We learned that Chizkiyahu was a sandwich between two rotten kings, and because his father was a rotten king, everybody was tamei, and he was the first Baal Tshuva king, and he made everybody bring the Korban Pesach again, and he intercalated the year because everybody was tamei, and there was a machloket in the Gemarah whether that was something that he needed to apologize for itself, or whether what he did wrong was only in the timing of the intercalation. Any questions? By the way, that summary is for my benefit for next week, because then I don't have to listen to the whole shir. I just need to listen to the summary, and then I know where we're up to. So in case you're wondering why I do the summary, it's not because I think you've forgotten from what we just did an hour ago. It's because I haven't got time to listen to the whole thing again next week. Yes, Leon.
There was one thing, I vaguely seem to remember reading somewhere, there's another reason why the public as a whole, or perhaps a majority, might be tamei. Was it something to do with an illegal war or something like that?
That's you're remembering correctly. In the Torah, we're told that the people that came out of Mitzrayim, they some of them were tamei, and some of them, the reason they were tamei was that they were carrying the bodies of Yosef HaTzadik, and so therefore there was the bones of Yosef HaTzadik. So that's why they had to have. They came along and they said to Moshe, if you remember, hey, it's not fair. We want to do Korban Pesach, and we're tamei for a good reason. We were doing a mitzvah. So Moshe says, good point. I'll go and ask Hashem. Hashem says, do Pesach Sheni, right? So that's one thing. I think what you're possibly referring to is after the Meraglim. After the Meraglim, there was an illegal war, because after the spies, some people said, oh, we're sorry, we'll go up into the land. And Moshe says, don't go, Hashem's not with you. And then there was an illegal war. They all went and they all got killed. And so therefore they had to be, those lot had to be buried and dealt with. And so a lot of people of those tribes were tamei from going to deal with the deaths that turned out from that illegal war. I think that's probably what you're referring to.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, points? Jolly good. Then in that case, we will say Shavua Tov and carry on next week, please God.